we've got, extreme heat events. We have these precipitation events that lead to flooding and rivers flooding. We also have wildland interface fires, as they're called, and we've got sea level rise and storm surge and coastal erosion. So all of those kind of hazards contribute to risk for Canada's infrastructure. What we see also, though, is a pretty healthy response from Canada's cities and towns to protect that infrastructure, because that's a big job of cities. And so you see in places like Selkirk, Manitoba, or Courtenay, BC, where they're working on their asset management practices, which is a way to make sure that your future infrastructure decisions consider the future climate. So making sure that stormwater infrastructure is big enough for those rainstorms of the future.
The northern Arctic and subarctic communities are particularly being affected by rapid changes in climate, and certainly that's affecting way of life, access to food and water security, has impacts on culture and sense of place. So they're offering their local expertise to help us understand how climate is changing, and doing things like creating the ENUC app, which we talk about as an example from Labrador, to use technology to track observations about the local environment and share those observations about the safety of sea ice conditions, for example, or other kinds of changes with their neighbors and other community members.
Most communities have developed community wildfire protection plans or community wildfire resiliency plans and are using those to inform fuel management. Homes and businesses have been slowly fire smarting their homes and making their neighborhoods less vulnerable. And then we've also developed a regionally specific climate change data website so that folks in our region have access to place-based information on climate science and impacts.
Canada is a very large country, and so depending on where you are in the country, the impacts will be quite different. We know, as an example, that the Arctic has been warming faster than anywhere else in Canada. We see some tremendous changes in places like the Yukon, where they have washouts of roads due to increased flow. And so in those areas, they're going to have to adapt a little quicker than maybe some of the other areas of Canada. The other things we're seeing across Canada is increase in eutrophication of lakes. We see a lot more algal blooms than we've seen in the past. So adaptation approaches are really going to have to focus on sort of local solutions for these larger problems.
Nature-based approaches to adaptation or nature-based solutions can be described as solutions that are inspired and supported by nature. Everything from protected areas to ecosystem-based management, green or natural infrastructure, watershed management, for instance. All of these approaches really help decision makers manage by considering ecosystems as a whole. These solutions are cost effective. They provide a range of environmental, social, and economic benefits in addition to climate change mitigation and adaptation, and they help to develop resilience.
In some sectors, there are direct impacts on production in things like forestry, fisheries, and agriculture. They're affected by extreme events like floods, drought, and heat waves, as well as slower onset events like temperature increases beyond what species can handle. Most of the sectors across Canada also experience indirect impacts on their operations. This would be disruptions to infrastructure and supply chains. For example, the transportation sector has many cascading impacts on some of the other sectors. The Churchill rail line was closed for 18 months due to a combination of flooding and changes in the permafrost.
It is really important that society, the business, the governments adapt their current behavior. And this will require money. This will require finance. The sources of finances are growing in number and diversity. There are more entities that are involved in financing and supporting investments to improve how society copes with climate change and climate risks. The different number of sources of finance is exciting as it is growing and improving, yet much is needed. It will be a very big challenge for society to find all of the money needed to properly and fully adapt.
The good news message is that the evidence to date in Canada suggests that the benefits of adaptation generally outweigh the costs of adaptation. As part of the national assessment, we reviewed a sample of 60 projects, and what we found was that 75% of those projects generated benefits in excess of their costs. And on average, each dollar invested in adaptation generated $5 to $6 in benefits.
Trade infrastructure is very important, and trade infrastructure includes, for example, seaports, freshwater ports like the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway, as well as highways, bridges, etc. The condition of this trade infrastructure, if it's diminished in some way, either damaged or destroyed by the combined effect of sea level rise and intense storms, then the flow of trade either can be disrupted or slowed down, and that has repercussions for producers who are paying certain rates to move their goods to market, as well as for consumers who may face different prices based on these disruptions, as well as simply face the case where the goods or services that they're seeking, the goods in this case, are just not available in their local markets.
Insured losses from extreme weather events like floods, fires, storms, etc., are both significant in dollar terms, and also have been rising steadily since the early 1980s. The scale of these losses suggests to me that our built urban environment is really underprepared for the current weather events and weather extremes that we see.
Climate change adaptation initiatives, so things like improving infrastructure or strengthening the urban forest, these types of initiatives need to be designed in a way that they benefit all members of society equally, and especially those folks who need it most. And this is especially true for Canada's urban Indigenous population. So we have roughly half of Canada's Indigenous population lives in cities and towns over 30,000. And we're increasingly hearing from Indigenous people that their knowledge and perspectives and their leadership are needed in order to increase adaptation and resilience in our cities.
So we've seen a lot of work in different parts of Canada, maybe different types of approaches, but they're all dealing with sort of local phenomena that they have to sort out. So this makes it particularly challenging. It's kind of not a one-size-fits-all for Canada, but we really need to think of a framework actually within Canada where we can help the provinces and territories and municipalities and at the federal level really come up with solutions that move some of these adaptation platforms ahead.
So some good news. I'd say people are listening. People are primed for change. And this is something that we can work on together. In fact, it is better together if we do this as an integrated, holistic way.